Frank Fritz, the beloved former co-host of American Pickers, passed away on September 30th, 2024, at the age of 60. But it wasn't just his sudden passing that left a mark on those closest to him. He also left behind a staggering fortune, one that would stir emotions, ignite tension, and perhaps even reveal a few unexpected twists. Before we delve into the wealth he accumulated, let's turn back the clock and revisit the final chapter of a man who spent his life uncovering America's forgotten treasures, only to become one himself. Frank's health had been in decline for years before his death. In 2022, he suffered a severe stroke, and the lasting effects of that cerebral infarction ultimately led to his passing 2 years later. According to TMZ, his death certificate listed the cause as complications from the stroke damage, so profound that his body simply couldn't recover. Yet, that wasn't the only challenge he faced. Frank also battled aortic stenosis, a condition that restricts blood flow through the heart, compounding his health struggles. It was a cruel twist of fate, one that even the sharpest pickers couldn't negotiate their way out of. But Frank's story wasn't just about hardship. It was also about redemption, especially in his relationship with longtime friend and American Pickers co-host, Mike Wolfe. Despite the ups and downs, their bond remained an integral part of Frank's journey, one that, in the end, spoke to something deeper than any antique ever could. Since middle school, the two had been inseparable, bonding over a common love of picking and growing up without fathers. What about fame and fortune? They have a way of causing cracks in even the most solid friendships. By 2021, their relationship had reached rock bottom. In an interview with The Sun, Frank was open about his dirty laundry. He accused Mike of turning American Pickers into a one-man show, likening their relationship to that of Steven Tyler and the rest of Aerosmith. Frank claimed that the show is completely skewed in his favor. It's like you have Aerosmith and Steven Tyler. I've discovered my spot. I'm second, while he's first on the show. Ouch. But here's an unexpected twist. Following Frank's stroke in 2022, the two started to rebuild their damaged friendship. By 2023, they had resumed communication, and Mike wasn't going to let his friend leave without putting things right. Mike told folks, "I got the call that he wasn't doing well. I just feel grateful that I was able to get there." Mike recalled those dying moments with kindness that could melt even the coldest hearts. "I was there for about an hour before he died, and I was holding his hand and caressing his chest when he took his final breath. I took my fingers and closed his eyelids. Let that settle in for a moment." Two men who had traveled more miles than most married couples, whose relationship had been challenged by celebrity, wealth, and personal problems, sought solace in the most peaceful, intimate way possible. Mike told Frank that he loved him. He wasn't angry anymore. And as Frank struggled to hold on, Mike pleaded, "Just go find your mom. Go find her now." It wasn't about antiques, TV ratings, or small-scale feuds at the time. It was about two buddies reconciling before the last curtain fell. But Frank Fritz was more than just a man with a heartwarming story. He was a man who turned a boyhood passion into a multi-million-dollar fortune. Frank, born in Davenport, Iowa, was a starter. Rocks, beer cans, you name it. However, it wasn't until his time as a fire inspector, when he spent 25 years checking fire safety equipment, that he realized he could turn his enthusiasm for locating uncommon artifacts into a business. Frank was already an experienced picker when American Pickers started on the History Channel in 2010. Frank traveled the country with Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby, looking for hidden gems in barns, garages, and junkyards. The show rapidly became a smash, appealing to viewers who enjoyed the thrill of discovery and nostalgia for fading Americana. Over the course of 22 seasons and 300 episodes, American Pickers did more than merely exhibit antiques. It demonstrated Frank's keen vision and infectious zeal. His ability to see value in what others discarded as rubbish made him a household name. And it wasn't simply the television show that helped him financially. Frank authored 2 books, American Picker's Guide to Picking 2011 and How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles 2013. They were bestsellers, cementing his reputation as an antiquities expert. Let's not forget Frank Fritz Finds, an antique shop in Savannah, Illinois. This was a booming enterprise that drew collectors and admirers from all over. By the time he died, Frank's net worth was estimated to be $6 million. That's correct. The man who used to trawl junkyards for rusted signs and vintage motorcycles had accumulated a fortune that many in the entertainment industry could only dream about. But here's the kicker. What happens with all that money? When someone leaves behind such a fortune, you would anticipate a few family members to cry, not out of grief, but because of the weight of what has been left behind. Frank's passing left more than simply an emotional gap. It created a financial legacy that would have long-term consequences for his loved ones. However, not all tears are created equal. Some people were in tears of thanks. Frank's generosity was well known, and those closest to him knew he had taken care of them in his last days. But there were also tears of regret, of squandered possibilities for reconciliation, of unspoken words. And, of course, there were the expected tears of frustration. Because when millions are at risk, even the closest relatives can come into conflict. But what did Frank's will say? Who was to inherit his multi-million-dollar estate? Was it family, friends, or even someone unexpected? Frank had the forethought to file his will in court 1 year before his death, on October 23, 2023. While his health had already been deteriorating since his stroke in 2022, no one anticipated things to worsen so quickly. But Frank wasn't the type to take chances, especially with his money. According to the United States Sun, Midwest One Bank, which had been appointed as his conservator following his stroke, has also been chosen as executor of his estate. What about the will itself? Sealed tightly. Whatever mysteries were therein were hidden. But one thing was obvious. The arrangements for his $6 million fortune were officially authorized just weeks after his death, on October 18, 2024. But first, let's take a look at what happened before that. When Frank suffered a crippling stroke in July 2022 in his Iowa farmhouse, it was more than simply a health concern. It was a watershed moment that switched control of his life from his own hands to those of others. His decision-making abilities were so hampered that he couldn't meet his fundamental necessities: food, shelter, and medical treatment. It wasn't long before loved ones applied for conservatorship and guardianship, putting Frank in a legal situation in which his financial and personal affairs were managed by others. Midwest One Bank handled his accounts, while his lifelong buddy Chris Davis served as his guardian, managing everything from his Crohn's disease medication to his physical therapy sessions. And then there were his favorite belongings, a large collection of old motorcycles and memorabilia that filled buildings on his property like an American nostalgia museum. The conservatorship papers indicated that, while these treasures had not been thoroughly inventoried, the aim was to maintain them mostly intact, with a few pieces used to supply his antique store, Fritz Finds, in Savannah, Illinois. But how about his family? Who were the persons left behind after Frank's death? And how did they factor into his fortune? Here's when things become difficult. Frank never married, despite speculations in 2021 that he would marry his longtime lover Diane. What's the truth? They had split up long before he died, their relationship crumbling beneath the weight of deception and anguish. In a July 2021 interview with The Sun, Frank confessed that he had planned to marry Diane and had already purchased a new home for them. But while on the road filming American Pickers, he realized she had another lover at home. Frank said, "It hurt my feelings, my self-esteem, and my entire world." His solution was to drown his anguish in booze, which marked the start of a long and hard battle with addiction. Diane, for her side, refuted Frank's account of events. She informed The Sun that what he is stating is not true. If he's attempting to make me appear bad, of course, I'll say it's not true. The harm had already been done, regardless of whether her side of the tale was true. By 2019, the relationship had ended, leaving Frank to pick up the pieces of a life he believed he understood. So, with no wife or children, who did Frank consider family? Friends, that's who. People like Chris Davis, who became Frank's guardian following the stroke, and Jerry Gendro, a lifelong friend who candidly discussed Frank's final months. He felt terrible, Jerry recounted, remembering visits to Frank in the nursing home, where one side of his body was entirely immobilized. He would elevate his arm, and it would simply drop. Being completely bedridden must be a difficult experience. Frank's fury was evident. He couldn't express what he wanted to say, but some days were better than others. Jerry summed it out in a way that got right to the point. "I believe Frank could have lived much longer if he had the will to live." And then there was Mike Wolfe, Frank's closest friend, and, at times, furious opponent. Their relationship had been a roller coaster, from middle school friends to co-hosts of one of the History Channel's most popular shows, and then alienated co-workers. However, by the time Frank's health deteriorated, they had reconciled. Despite the emotional closure, the question remained: did Mike Wolfe stand to inherit any of Frank's fortune? It's difficult to say. The terms of Frank's estate distribution remain unknown, as the will has been sealed. What we do know is that Frank's financial legacy was inextricably linked to his antique collection and company, Fritz Finds. His friend Jerry intimated that an auction was in the works, leveraging Frank's fan base to ensure that his valuables found homes with those who truly valued them. "That's what I do because of his fan following," Jerry explained. "I think he'll do quite well in an auction." While the antique world speculated about the fate of Frank's collection, his biological and chosen family dealt with the emotional aftermath of his death. It wasn't only about the money. It was about the guy who had made an indelible mark on their lives, whose battles with addiction and health had impacted his final years in ways that no amount of money could undo. Frank's fight with addiction had been long and severe, resulting not just from loss, but also from years of chronic agony caused by Crohn's disease and a broken back. The latter underwent surgery in 2019, but the recuperation was far from easy. Frank found relief in painkillers, but this rapidly became into dependency. By the time he left American Pickers in 2020, his addiction was no longer hidden from those closest to him. Mike Wolfe, in particular, saw the toll it took on his friend. Mike stated that he became addicted to painkillers, which changed everything. He organized interventions, promoted rehabilitation, and never lost up hope that Frank would find his way back. But how much did Frank Fritz's struggles with addiction and health difficulties cost him financially and emotionally? The answer may surprise you. At the height of his profession, Frank had a comfortable $6 million nest egg. However, by the time he died, a large portion of his fortune had been invested directly in healthcare. We are not discussing normal medical visits or prescription refills. Frank was spending $3,000 per month on medical and in-home care following his stroke in 2022. That's nearly $36,000 per year, a startling sum that even a reality TV star would struggle to maintain for long. It wasn't simply about hospital expenditures. The bills included 24-hour nursing, physical therapy, and specialized treatments to handle not only the consequences of his stroke, but also his ongoing battles with Crohn's disease and aortic stenosis. His Iowa farmhouse, previously a haven for vintage motorcycles and rare antiques, had to be modified with medical equipment and wheelchair ramps, transforming it into more of a care facility than a residence. Frank's home, located in LeClaire, Iowa, was as simple and unassuming as the guy himself. Originally purchased for $130,000 in 2010, the modest two-bedroom, one-bath residence spanned 1,660 square feet and sat on 3/4 of an acre. However, its worth has tripled throughout the years, reaching $3,927,27 by 2024. Next door, he held an extra parcel of land zoned for single-family use, which increased the property's value. Despite the property's increasing worth, it was insufficient to cover the avalanche of medical expenditures. The farmhouse, once a symbol of his success and love for Americana, became a mute witness to his later years, which were marred by medical deterioration and financial hardship. However, Frank Fritz was never only concerned with money or material belongings. His true impact is in the lives he touched and the passion he instilled in millions of fans. American Pickers was more than simply a television show. It was a cultural phenomenon. Frank's keen eye for antiquities and down-to-earth personality transformed lost relics into prized possessions. He made us recognize the worth of items we would have otherwise overlooked, such as rusting gas station signs, vintage toys, and ancient motorcycles gathering dust in a barn. Frank believed that every item had a story and that every story was worth sharing. And it wasn't all about the antiques. Frank's story resonated with people because he was authentic. He was neither polished nor rehearsed. He was the guy next door with a gift for discovering hidden gems and a heart full of humor and humility. He openly battled Crohn's disease, discussing his sufferings with admirers who recognized themselves in his narrative. He battled addiction and loss, demonstrating that even those we revere the greatest are not immune to life's most difficult trials. After leaving American Pickers in 2020, Frank continued to influence the antique world through his shop, Frank Fritz finds in Savannah, Illinois. Even as his health deteriorated, the store remained a gathering spot for collectors and enthusiasts alike, where Frank's soul lived on through the treasures he had discovered over the years. Even after he died, his legacy lives on. Plans are on to auction off some of his beloved collection, which will not only honor his lifelong passion, but also assist in recuperating some of the financial burden his healthcare expenditures imposed on his estate. Fans will be able to own a piece of Frank's history, transforming his life's work into beloved memories that may be passed down through generations. But, beyond the antiques and TV celebrity, Frank Fritz leaves something far more valuable, a lesson that life is about the journey, not the goal. He demonstrated that success is defined not only by how much money you make, but also by how much you enjoy your work. Even with his tribulations, he showed us resilience, humility, and the value of never giving up, no matter how difficult the journey. Frank once said, "Life is what you make it. If you don't put in the effort, you won't get anything out of it." He dedicated himself completely to his profession, friendships, and passions. And while his fortune may have shrunk due to medical expenditures, his impact is priceless. His legacy lives on via the riches he unearthed, the people he inspired, and the numerous memories he left behind. While the journey may have been difficult, Frank wrote it with passion, humor, and an indomitable spirit that will never be forgotten.